Maybe not one of the most glamorous ways to catch fish, but definitely one of the most effective. Today we're gonna cover some of my favorite JDM style of Ned rig baits. How's it going, guys? Travis here from Tackle Bros. And Ned rigging has kind of become one of those things that a lot of guys seem to dislike throwing for whatever reason. I think because it's very simple and it can be slow to fish. But there is a bunch of amazing baits that catch absolute giants year-round on the Ned rig. Now, this is something that I do up here in Canada for catching gigantic smallmouth. They catch giant largemouth. It's just an overall fish catcher, something crazy, crazy productive. If you're looking for numbers or you need an extra fish in a tournament, I always turn to a Ned rig. Constantly have one on the deck. And these are gonna be some of my favorite JDM Ned rig baits that we're gonna go over. I'll talk to you about the rod that I use, why I use it, and maybe just some different ways that we fish it. So let's jump right in. And I'm gonna start off with my rod of choice. Now, I'm a huge fan of G.Loomis, especially on the spinning side. And the rod that I use 99% of the time for all of my Ned rigging is gonna be the 842 SJR. This is a spinning jig rod. It's gonna be 7 foot, fast, medium. So not a crazy fast tip, but this thing is pretty soft at the tip section. My hookup ratio on this is great. Now, the reason why this rod is so effective for me is gonna be based on the gauge of hook that I use. I use probably a little bit heavier of a hook than what most people would consider a Ned rig hook. Like a lot of those, you know, Z-Man hooks are pretty light wire. I know they do have the Pro Shrooms and stuff like that, which are great, a little bit heavier gauge, but I'm very picky with hooks when it comes to fishing in general. So I tend to lean towards companies that are using gammy hooks or owner hooks. That's a lot of the reason for this rod. Now, if I'm throwing ultra small or ultra light heads, I'll go to something like the Ned rig rod in the Steez lineup. It's gonna have a stinger tip, which is gonna allow me to not move that bait so much with it being lightweight. It'll keep it in the area that I want it to and just kind of shake around because, you know, shaking and moving your bait can be a super effective way for you to, you know, intrigue a fish. For the argument's sake of this one, we're gonna stick to the 842. So 7 foot, medium fast, NRX plus spinning. It is a phenomenal rod. The amount of feedback that the NRX series of rods gives you is incredible. I love a cork handle. It's almost always going to be paired up with an Xsense. I'm using that same Sunline Almight line. I love that pink line. Ned rigging is one of those ones where you really want to have that direct line connection to your bait. And then I'll run a bit of a heavier leader. This is a 10-pound leader in the Sunline Sniper series. It's a do everything. Sniper is one of those lines that if you only were using Sniper, you can do everything very effectively. It's very invisible. It's very abrasion resistant. It's just a good overall line. And I go up to that 10-pound because a lot of the time when you're fishing Ned rigs, you're fishing in around zebra mussels, rocks, things that will nick up your line, and this just holds up a little bit better on that 10-pound. A lot of times when I'm doing anything bottom contact related, I go up to that little bit of a heavier line just to add that abrasion resistance. It doesn't hurt anything. I don't think the fish really notice it. It's not like a drop shot or something where you're trying to trick them into thinking something is hovering in the middle of the water column. So you can go up in line a lot of times on the Ned rig. That's my main rod reel line setup. In my opinion, one of the best setups. I know that NRX does make a Ned rig specific rod, the 821 NRR. For me, it's a great Ned rig rod, but it really shines as a drop shot rod. That softer medium light tip with the length, it just, for me, that's what I generally use that rod for. So let's jump into baits. Actually, let's do heads first. I'm kind of right now living between two styles of heads. Both of these are hook related is the reason why I'm using them, and both of them are gammies. So I've been using the Tungsten Ned rig heads. These are tungsten. And I've recently started using the Outkast Tackle Perfect Ned. This is a little bit different, and I'll explain to you when I go to this one over this one. This hook is much stouter than the Tungsten one, so a bit heavier gauge hook. I like that a lot of the time, especially if I'm targeting largemouth specifically. Just getting that hook penetration, it's really nice to have. Okay, so let's talk about some of the baits that I'm using. Most of these are gonna be, if not all of them, I believe, are all in that high float, super durable, buoyant material. I think it's important to do that. Now, I do have one exception, and I'll get into that with you guys, but for the most part, these are gonna be those baits that are very high buoyant, and that's important for Ned rig fishing because you're fishing bottom, you're creating a target for the fish to see kind of standing up. A lot of these baits have really great action while they're standing. This one that I'm holding is the Dual Realis Wriggle ND Slim. So Wriggle ND, this is our shop custom color. This is gonna be green pumpkin, purple gold flake. I've kind of stole this from another brand. It's called Goby. We have a lot of Goby in our fisheries. This darker green pumpkin with those flakes. You guys have heard me talk about this 100 times. I think that smallmouth in specific have something with that purple flake. If we do, you know, any shop stuff that we do is, if I'm doing a green pumpkin, I'm always gonna have that purple flake. I don't know what it is, but it seems to bring me more bites, bring me larger fish, so I stick with that. Now, this one in particular is my favorite Ned rig bait. It has been for probably like the last, since it came out, so probably about 2 years now. This thing does something really cool in the water. So a lot of them are do nothing baits. They kind of sit on the bottom, they don't move, they don't wiggle, nothing. If you guys throw the TRDs a lot, you'll know that. This one, if you pop it up while it's coming back to you, this tail is doing a lot of this. Now, that's effective while you're popping it. It's also effective while you're shaking it. But the real key to this one is when I feel like I'm done with the cast and I'm bringing it back to me, it creates almost like a swimming action. And I've caught so many fish bringing that bait back to me when I think that the cast is done and I need to restart. Something to do with this tail, the bulbs on this are slight, but they're there. So if you look, it's not just a straight up and down bait. There's 3 bulbs that make this thing up, and it gives it a little extra action in the water. Catching a fish when you think your cast is done, there's nothing better than that, and this one helps me do that a lot, which is awesome. Now the next one up, we're staying high buoyancy, so still that super stretchy material, is gonna be the Nikko Hellgrammite. This bait has been wildly popular. This was one of the first JDM brands that we actually brought into the shop. So I have a soft spot for Nikko. They make amazing product, but they specialize in that high buoyancy material. So a lot of their stuff in their lineup is all super durable, super stretchy, and high float. This is no exception to that. Bug baits over the last couple of years have made a huge surge. I think it stems from bank fishing. You know, you bank fishermen seem to be a little bit more willing to experiment with baits, which is awesome, and then it trickles into, you know, kind of everything else. This is no exception to that. Hellgrammites exist almost everywhere in North America. These are ultra effective. If I'm fishing in a creek or around a creek mouth, this is what I go to right away. I think there's something to do with Hellgrammites where there's a couple times during the year or when the water gets very high that these go into the water and bass absolutely crush them. This is the 3-inch size of the Hellgrammite. It's also available in a larger 4-inch size. 3 inches where I live most of the time. I've thrown the 4-inch, but generally if I'm throwing the 4-inch, I'm actually using it on bait casting and I'm kind of flipping in and around, you know, bush and grass and stuff like that. But for Ned rigging, this is an under the radar, not under the radar anymore, but I'll say underutilized bait. You can catch absolute giants on this thing, and like most of these baits, it's gonna last you all day. Now, this is a newer bait and not something that was specifically designed for Ned rigging, but if you look at the core of what a lot of these stick bait style Ned rigs are, it almost looks like a little bait kind of eating off bottom. D-Style has come out with the new Virola 3-inch Type E, so Type Elastomer. High buoyancy, super stretchy, super durable. You put one of these onto the bottom of one of those flat or rolling bottom Ned rigs, this looks exactly like a bait fish eating off bottom. They absolutely smash this thing. I've had multiple instances where we're throwing drop shot and we're shrinking that leader, trying to get to the point where the fish are feeling comfortable with it. You have to adjust that thing a lot if you're really, targeting and dialing in fish. After the leader gets so short, there's not really much more you can do. I have thrown this thing out there and it's completely changed my day. It just looks natural in the water. It's a little bait fish eating on bottom. You can kind of hop it around, but it stays buoyant, so the tail end stays up. It's kind of wagging around. It's got realistic eyes, comes in a phenomenal amount of amazing D-Style colors. It's become a staple for pretty much everybody at the shop now that fishes Ned rigs a lot. This is a really, really cool one. This is the D-Style Virola Type E. Right now, this is only available in a 3-inch. I hope they come up with a 4-inch because that would be a perfect size for later in the year when some of the bait fish start getting a little bit bigger, or if you have bottom feeding fish like we do up here with the goby, they start to get pretty big. But this 3-inch catches them flat out. It's been an amazing one. Okay, another one I've had a lot of fun fishing this year. This is a newer product and not something that I would have immediately gravitated towards for Ned rig style baits, but when they came out with the Elastomer version, it really spoke to me as something that would work for this. This is the Geecrack Bellows Gill, 2.8 inch. So small little bluegill profile. This is gonna work similar to that D style. It looks like a bluegill feeding on bottom. As this thing is kind of bouncing around, the tails don't stop moving. It looks like a happy little bluegill just enjoying its day, and the bass come up and they absolutely smash this thing. Now for the D style and for the Bellows Gill, this is what kind of put me onto this perfect Ned. It has sort of a rounded bottom. It allows this thing to kind of, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like pendulum? Yeah, it kind of allows the bait to pendulum around a little bit. So as you're kind of bringing it back, this will, you know, wobble forward and wobble back. Again, it looks like a bluegill eating on bottom. This is something that they eat every single day. And this Bellows Gill, with that high buoyancy now, it's gonna still stand up. And then as it's kind of doing this while you're, you know, bringing that bait back or shaking it a little bit, that head is kind of what keyed me into this sort of, you know, bluegill bait fish eating on bottom style of Ned rig fishing. And it's been ultra effective. So the Bellows Gill, floating type, so that Elastomer, super durable, high float. It's been an absolute killer. Now, they also make the Bellows stick in a 3.8 in the Elastomer. This is a great one if you're looking for like a little bit bigger profile of Ned rig. So this is just shy of 4 inches. If I'm noticing that, you know, I'm getting bites on something in that 3-inch size, but they're not kind of what I want, I will just start throwing out bigger stuff. Sometimes the big fish don't want to move for a small little meal. This 3.8 inch has been a great fill-in for that. We actually used to use the old Z-Man, the hulas, so they're about 4 inches. This has completely replaced that. That deep ribbing allows the tail to move around quite a bit. It's muted compared to the original because of the elastomer material, but your trade-off is that high buoyancy. So this thing's still standing up perfectly straight. It's just become a phenomenal fish catcher. Now there's other great JDM options in like the Ned rig category. This Super Ned, when we first got this thing, I was absolutely mind blown with how much it was catching. It's basically just like the top of a Senko cut off. They eat the crap out of this thing. Another one that I used originally when I started Ned rig fishing, this is the Roboworm. So this is the 3-inch Ned Worm. This color is green pumpkin perch. That chartreuse tail for some reason spoke to me so much. The issue with this one is it is not high floating, so this one will fall over. There's a time and a place for that. You don't always need to have the high float. It's obviously, you know, 9 times out of 10 you kind of want to have that high float, but sometimes if it's a little bit too aggressive for the fish, I will still go back to this Roboworm and they eat the crap out of this thing. Again, this is the original bait that made me fall in love with Ned rigging, so it's something that I always keep in the boat. So the next time you guys are struggling to catch pressured fish and you know you just need an extra bite, or you're just going fun fishing, this is something that we give to people that are just coming in the store. Maybe they're not ultra familiar with fishing. It's a super easy technique to learn and master. Putting these baits onto some of these hooks can be a bit of a challenge, so what I will do is, let's just start fresh and we'll go over what I do. So putting elastomer on a lot of these hooks is not fun. So this is the hook. I got a fresh bait. We're just gonna line it up here so I know where it comes out. A lot of times, so that I know I'm gonna keep this thing straight, what I will do is I will figure out where the hook point is and I will just mark it with my hook. So I know exactly where the hook's gonna come out on this now. Then you're gonna take this, where's my hook? There it is. You're gonna thread it into the bait. You're gonna make sure the hook point comes out. And then you're gonna end up with something that looks like this. You can push it down. It takes a long time. The thing that we do that I've found super effective is just kind of snapping it up. It sits it up there, snugs it perfect. You'll have a perfect rigging every single time if you have that little indicator hole and you just kind of pull this down over it. This is the Woo Tungsten version, so it has a nice little hook keeper on there. It'll keep the bait really nice and fixed to that hook. And it's just, like I said, a great fish catcher for everyday fishing. Catches a million fish, catches big ones too. Try the Ned rig next time you're going out fishing.